A new warning tonight about deadly fentanyl here in Central Texas.
A big crackdown on drug trafficking in the Houston and Galveston areas. Today, the U.S. Attorney's Office announced dozens of arrests in relation to drug trafficking crime.
5:17 a.m., Houston, Texas. In the area surrounding a federal building within the Department of Homeland Security system, everything remained in absolute silence. No sirens, no flashing lights, not a single sign of warning. Then suddenly the silence was torn apart. A convoy of 14 unmarked federal SUVs moved in from multiple directions, locking down every exit with precise coordination. Seconds later, 2 armored vehicles stopped at the main entrance. Above, a surveillance helicopter flew low, circled once, then held position. This was not a visit. This was a federal raid. According to investigators, this location served as the operational office of a senior executive in Texas, Isabella Renee Mercer, 47, a prominent name in private finance and healthcare. The figure behind luxury real estate developments, charitable foundations, and a business network spanning logistics to medical transport. But behind that polished image, federal authorities alleged something far more dangerous. A $2 billion trafficking empire, not immigration, not weapons. According to officials, it was a large-scale drug trafficking network involving 2.5 tons of cocaine and fentanyl, hidden within seemingly legitimate companies protected by bribery, falsified documentation, and the cooperation of corrupt officials. At 5:26 a.m., enforcement warrants were executed. More than 21 agents from the FBI, ICE, and Homeland Security investigations entered in coordinated formation. Glass doors were breached within seconds. Keycard systems were disabled. Internal security protocols were overridden. Within moments, tactical teams flooded every floor of one of the most sensitive administrative zones in the security system. Inside, the first discovery stunned even seasoned agents. Federal sources say they recovered over $11.8 million in cash, stacked in sealed bundles hidden inside wall compartments and locked safes. They also seized 7 encrypted hard drives, 11 burner phones, and a handwritten ledger, what agents now call the Black Book. And that Black Book contained the detail that changed everything. 20 named officials, not rumors, not speculation. Each name tied to permits, inspections, approvals, and protection payments directly linked to the movement of tons of narcotics. Investigators claim the bribe totals recorded so far exceed $78.6 million. One entry, dated just 17 days earlier, reportedly listed a single payment of $1.22 million marked with only 2 words: erase records. By sunrise, federal agents had sealed off the entire office complex. Evidence boxes were continuously carried out. Documents, devices, financial records. Then a senior federal official made a statement that froze the scene. This is not just organized crime. This is betrayal from within the system. Because this raid was not just targeting an executive office. It marked the beginning of what authorities describe as one of the most serious human trafficking investigations in Texas in recent years. If this truth sends a chill down your spine, hit like and subscribe now, because in the next part, we will go deeper into how this network operated and the people behind it. Authorities say they discovered 6 drug distribution cells that were being operated out of the Houston area by Dominican nationals who also had ties to a Mexican drug cartel. By early dawn, the office complex in Houston had been sealed off like a crime scene from a nightmare. But what federal agents uncovered inside the encrypted hard drives did not resemble any legitimate office. It described a system. Investigators say this empire was not built on luck or talent, but on a structure organized with the precision of a corporate blueprint. And at the center of that system was a disturbing reality. Drugs were being operated as a commodity. According to federal sources, the network had the capability to move shipments across Texas in under 6 hours, disguised as medical transport, valid paperwork, licensed vehicles, uniformed personnel. And that was exactly what made it nearly impossible to detect, because it blended seamlessly into everyday life. Authorities believe the entire operation was shielded by at least 5 legitimate front companies. Loniar Pediatric Transport Services, listed as a provider of emergency transport for children. Gulf Air Youth Outreach Network, promoted as a non-profit supporting at-risk youth. Blue River Medical Supply Company, a supplier of medical equipment and disposable devices. Silver Path Rehabilitation Center, a rehabilitation facility with restricted access areas. Red Mesa Cold Chain Logistics, a regional contractor specializing in temperature-sensitive cargo. On paper, it looked like a community service operation. But according to investigators, it was in fact a highly sophisticated drug trafficking network in disguise. According to internal DHS summaries, investigators flagged at least 61 high-risk cases in 18 months connected to the same movement pattern. Similar routes, similar paperwork, similar time windows. In more than 40 of those cases, the medical reasons listed were copied word for word, as if stamped from one template. Then came the money. Federal analysts believe nearly $2 billion was funneled through ghost contracts, fraudulent invoices, and international transactions broken into thousands of smaller payments to avoid detection. One encrypted spreadsheet reportedly contained more than 3,200 transactions, all labeled with codes instead of names. No patients, no clients, only transaction IDs. And the numbers were staggering. One ledger entry showed that in a single month, the system generated $27.44 million in revenue, while another file listed operational costs, including payments to drivers, document handlers, and off-the-books disbursements to keep everything running smoothly. But the most alarming part was not just the money, it was how the system operated. Agents say the network functioned like an industrial assembly line: collection, transport, distribution, and laundering. Drugs were concealed within medical shipments, moving along legitimate routes protected by valid documentation and official seals. And that was the moment investigators reached a conclusion that transformed this case from disturbing to historic. This was not just drug trafficking. This was a large-scale criminal enterprise protected by professional contractors, falsified records, and authorized signatures from within the system. And behind it all remained one unanswered question. Who inside the system allowed this flow of money and goods to exist for so long? If you want to know who was protecting this operation, stay with me in the next part, because the truth behind it is not just about money, but about the people who allowed it to happen. Tonight we can report the biggest bust ever of fentanyl, which killed about 18,000 Americans last year. As the investigation expanded, one fact became impossible to deny. This was not a crime hidden in the shadows. It was happening in plain sight. Because a $2 billion drug network cannot exist on silence alone, it operates through permission, stamped documents, approved licenses, ignored inspections, and perfectly timed nods. And that was the moment the case shifted from concerning to explosive. According to federal investigators, the Houston raid did not just uncover financial trails and encrypted files. It also exposed a highly organized bribery system operating like an underground payroll, recording names, dates, amounts, and even detailed instructions. Agents referred to it with a single phrase: the profit map. Sources close to the investigation say the total recorded bribes have already exceeded $78.6 million, and investigators believe that number is only the beginning. These payments were not random. They were carefully calculated. Smaller payments kept lower-level doors open. Mid-level payments ensured routine compliance, and the largest payments resolved everything. Federal analysts divided the structure into 3 levels of corruption. Tier 1 looked the other way: payments. These were paid to prevent questions from being asked. $6,000 to $12,000 per inspection, $18,000 for after-hours paperwork approvals, $25,000 for rushed licensing stamps. It sounds small until you understand the scale. Investigators say some clinics and transport routes were cleared 10 to 14 times per month, meaning a single corrupted office could quietly collect $150,000 in bribes without triggering alarms. Tier 2, monthly protection money. This was the backbone that turned the system into organized crime. Federal sources claimed there were recurring payments monthly, predictable, structured like salaries, $80,000 to $120,000 per month paid to enforcement intermediaries, $45,000 per month to permit facilitators, $30,000 per month to data handlers responsible for record access. Some payments were tagged with a simple code shield because what they were buying wasn't service. They were buying protection. Tier 3, erase the records payments. These were the payments that made investigators go silent for a full minute when they saw them. Because Tier 3 wasn't bribery, it was sabotage. One entry dated just 17 days before the raid listed a single payment of $1.2 million. 2 words beside it: erase records. Another entry listed $950,000 tied to a data purge, followed by a note that read, "No trace 24 hours." And another $2.44 million marked as emergency relocation with a private flight log attached. That means someone had the power to delete, edit, or bury government information on demand. But the part that pushed this investigation into political firestorm territory was the names. According to the ledger seized in the mansion, the Black Book investigators say the network listed 20 named officials split across 4 key areas of influence: medical oversight and licensing, local law enforcement coordination, county-level administrative approvals, border clearance and identity verification channels. Not 20 strangers, 20 individuals holding real power. Investigators believe the bribery did not stop at individuals, but was organized through corporate channels to conceal the financial flow tied to drug trafficking. The money was routed through 3 primary intermediary entities: Hawthorne Compliance Group, registered as a legal compliance service; Westbridge Capital Holdings, a multi-layered shell corporation; Silverline Community Foundation, a charitable front used to conceal transactions. According to reports within one encrypted file, investigators identified more than 3,200 suspicious transactions with a total estimated value of approximately $112 million, all showing clear signs of organized drug-related money laundering. And then came a conclusion that made the entire investigative team pause. This network did not bribe to expand. It bribed to survive, because every time paperwork should have stopped it, someone signed. Every time inspection should have exposed it, someone looked away. Every time the system should have intervened, money moved instead. And that is why the next phase of the case is no longer just about raids. It shifts into something more sophisticated: how drugs were disguised, transported, and concealed, and how this entire system managed to operate undetected for so long. If you think this is the peak of the case, you are mistaken. The next part will reveal how this system functioned in the shadows, and why it was able to exist for so long without being exposed. At this point, corruption was no longer a theory. It had been documented, it had been priced, and it was being operated like a fully structured business process. But the most disturbing part of this investigation was not just the money or the officials. It was how the system operated in plain sight without being detected. Because according to federal investigators, this network did not transport drugs through secret routes. They disguised it within legitimate systems that society trusts. According to investigative records, the network used 3 public channels to move illegal goods without raising suspicion: medical transport trips registered as emergency responses, shipments of medical equipment recorded as consumable supplies, temperature-controlled logistics routes designated for pharmaceuticals. To the average person, the documentation appeared completely valid. To inspection personnel, it looked like a routine transport. And to the system, it was legitimate data. That was the perfect cover. Investigators say the drugs were moved through a chain of locations that left no clear trace. No fixed storage points, no officially repeated routes, no consistent records. Transfers were carried out through affiliated facilities, short-term rental apartments used as temporary transfer points, restricted storage rooms inside rehabilitation centers, vehicles labeled as ambulances or medical transport units. Then the evidence emerged and the investigation shifted from suspicion to confirmation. According to federal sources, analysis of GPS data and operational logs identified 52 suspicious transport trips between Houston, Austin, and San Antonio, all following the same corridor with time gaps of only 30 minutes as if programmed. Within 9 days, investigators discovered multiple data files that had been edited and re-uploaded after midnight, all using the same login credentials. And in recovered communications, one phrase appeared repeatedly: "Do not enter into the system." This was not lost cargo. This was data being deliberately erased. Then came the money. Analysts identified approximately $29 million directly tied to these transport operations disguised as medical expenses, logistics contracts, and service payments. Every trip had documentation. Every document had a signature. But none of them reflected the truth. And that was when the public began to understand why federal authorities had to intervene at an emergency level. Because this network was not just transporting drugs. It was operating through the weaknesses of the system. Trusted procedures, ignored inspections, approved signatures that were never questioned. One senior investigator summarized it in a single sentence: "This is not conventional smuggling. This is a system protected from within." After weeks of surveillance, monitoring, and financial analysis, federal agents reached a conclusion. The office in Houston was not the only location. It was only the coordination center, and the next phase of the operation would directly target the entire network operating behind it. At 6:04 a.m., the final phase began, not just in one city, but across the entire state of Texas. According to federal sources, 18 simultaneous enforcement operations were launched from Houston to Austin and San Antonio. Within minutes, the network's financial system was brought down. Accounts were frozen, transactions were blocked, and cash flow came to a halt. The empire began to collapse. Investigators determined this was a drug trafficking network worth more than $2 billion. In the first wave of raids, authorities seized more than 2.8 tons of narcotics, nearly 1.1 million counterfeit fentanyl pills, and hundreds of kilograms of precursor chemicals. All of these drugs had been divided and distributed across multiple locations throughout Texas, each site holding only a fraction, just enough to avoid suspicion, but when connected, forming a large-scale distribution system. Financially, authorities seized and froze a total of $29 million, along with 29 high-value properties, 18 luxury vehicles, 3 private aircraft, and multiple accounts and digital wallets linked to money laundering. At the same time, the federal government shut down 8 front companies, the core components that enabled the network to operate and conceal its activities over an extended period. But the biggest shock was not the assets or the drugs. It was the people. Federal prosecutors confirmed indictments targeting 20 individuals, including officials, corporate executives, and intermediaries accused of systematic bribery, approving fraudulent documentation, and concealing and manipulating data. The expected sentences reflected the severity of the case: life imprisonment or a minimum of 25 years for drug trafficking, up to 20 years for money laundering and financial fraud, and 10 to 15 years for corruption and conspiracy. Many defendants face multiple charges simultaneously, meaning sentences could extend for decades with no possibility of escape. As the sun rose over the Texas skyline, a statement was delivered. Brief but enough to redefine the entire case. This is not over. This is only the beginning, because the biggest question still remains: how many shipments are still undetected? And how many individuals within the system allowed this operation to exist for so long? If the scale of this network sends a chill down your spine, hit like and subscribe now, because what has just collapsed in Texas may only be a small part of something far larger. Stay with us, because we will continue to expose everything,